Hello and welcome to How to Review a Page for SEO with me and with the beautiful Molly as your guides. So strap yourself in, let's go. So we're going to cover three things. The first thing is on-site research, and then we're going to go on to competitor research, and then we're going to finish it all off with an on-site review, aren't we, Molly? Yes, we are. So to start off, let's go through on-site research. So for on-site research, this is where you'll be looking at your page to really find out what the aims are. It's a good starting place as any, really. So the first thing you need to look at when you're looking at the page that you want to review is what's it designed to do. So look at the intent. And there are four sorts of intent that you need to map it towards. So informational, navigational, transactional, conversational, and actually sometimes it's a mix of those. So for an informational intent, that is where someone wants to know something. So on those pages, you need to be making sure that you are giving them value. This is where someone has a long tail question in mind, like what, when, why, how, could, should, those sorts of things. The types of content that would produce would be tips and guides. We next have navigational intent, and the easiest way to remember navigational content intent is that it's branded, really. So someone knows that they want to visit your site. So we need to make sure that it's easy to find, and we need to understand how people can get there to different pages and what sort of information they're actually looking for. So even though this is branded search terms, that might not just be your home page, that might be a contact page, claims page, it could be anything. So it's important to understand that mix as to whether or not someone will land on this page from a branded search point of view. The next one up is transactional intent. That's where someone wants to buy a product like yours. It might not necessarily be your product, but they are looking for something like what you sell. So that's where you need to make sure that you are telling people what benefit they'd get from picking you over picking somewhere else. So these could be really short questions like travel insurance, not really a question, or something that's a really long tail query like pet insurance for dogs over 8 with pre-existing conditions. It doesn't necessarily mean that one will convert better than the other, although typically a long tail will, because someone is further down in their decision making. So they might have already gone through a search for something as generic as pet insurance, realised that they're not finding what they're looking for, so had to go back and make a longer query that's more specific to their needs. So this sort of information looks like commercial pages. The next one, confusingly, is called commercial intent. Commercial intent is when someone is in full-on research mode. They don't really know what they're looking for. They know roughly the sort of product they're looking for, but they don't know what's good and what's bad, and they need to know that information before they make an informed decision about what they're going to buy. So this is kind of the stage before they're ready to buy. So these are often compounded transactional queries with an informational intent. So what's the best travel insurance? Do I really need pet insurance? So they're looking for information more than a transaction. And these people might actually transact off of that query if your answer is good enough. So that means that we've got a bit of a conundrum when it comes to the sorts of content that you produce around a commercial intent query. You could put this on a commercial page. After all, it's related to the topic. But if it's a really in-depth answer, then actually that needs to be broken out onto its own separate page into like a blog post or an FAQ with clear links back to the transactional page if they want to purchase. But then it's their decision. We're not pushing the USPs because they want answers after all. So once you've found out the intent of your page, you next need to find out how people are finding your page. You need to look in Google Analytics and basically find anything that you can about how people are using this page. So what channels are driving landings on it? What devices are they using? Is it part of someone's journey or is it just a landing page and then transact sort of thing? What do they do on the page when they're there? Do they watch videos? Do they scroll halfway down the page? What's that difference between mobile and desktop? If paid channels are landing and it's a transactional page, what terms are converting? Because that's the one channel that you can find out that information. So that can give you some really valuable insights. Once you know all of that information, have some learnings, you next need to look on tools like Google Search Console. So especially if you know that you're getting organic traffic, then this can tell you what is clicking through versus what you're getting impressions for. If you're not getting organic traffic, you might still be getting impressions. So it's worth having a look just to see what you're roughly ranking for. A few tips on these. So when you're looking in Google Analytics, make sure that your filter is containing the page URL rather than an exact match, because otherwise you're going to miss out on all the parameters, so you're not really going to get accurate data. The only thing to bear in mind is that if you're then looking at previous and next page paths, you can't do that on a parameter basis without setting that up as an individual segment. In Search Console, if you're looking at ranking data and you want accurate impressions and click-through data, obviously you're not always going to get 100% accurate data in there anyway, but make sure that you are filtering for country. It won't automatically do this, so you won't be getting a full, an accurate data set if you are looking at something on a country-specific basis. Next thing you want to look at is what are the barriers for this topic that you're looking at on that page. So this is where you need to do some digging into like generic keyword research by using a tool that can give you the high level keyword volumes for those generic terms. But you also need to really think about the long tail keywords. Just because a keyword comes up as 0 search volume doesn't mean that it's not valuable, because we know that what is it? I think it's something like 15% of searches per day are brand new searches that have never been performed ever before. So just because somebody chooses a longer variation doesn't mean that there aren't lots of similar ones that are valid. So if it's a valid question to answer, then it's still a valid thing to do if it's even if it's got 0 search volume. So you should be looking at tools like People Also Asked, look at the search bar autocomplete, Answer the Public is another great one, and you can also use social listening tools, so look at things like Reddit and Twitter for questions. There's lots of little search facilities that you can use on those tools to dig deeper into what people are asking about these sorts of things. So that is your first stage. So looking at your site and looking at what you think it should be. The next stage is looking at what your competitors are doing in this space. So first stage in this is to look at the SERP. So what is common on the SERP? So for those top keywords that you've looked at in the previous stage, look at kind of the positions 1 to 3 organically. And see what's common. Look at the meta descriptions and see what are the common elements that are being pulled through that Google think is the most important thing. It's important to also realise that this is just a snapshot in time and this may change at any given moment, really. So you also need to look at what features are pulling through onto the SERP. So is the news feed pulling through? Are images being pulled through? Is a shopping feed being pulled through? To really understand what can affect the click-through rate organically for this particular search term. Next thing you want to look at is what is the intent of the pages being featured for this keyword. So as we've already looked at the intent of our page, we know what our page should be answering. If this keyword that you've found that you think is really important, if that doesn't match, then you might want to rethink whether or not this is the right page for that. Because if someone, Google's obviously done a lot of analysis on matching the intent with a keyword. So if that intent at that moment in time doesn't match yours, either you need to change your page's intent, you need to create a different page that then matches that intent, or you need to not focus on that keyword for this page. Next, need to look at things like the meta titles and the meta descriptions that are pulling through. Are they pulling through the actual meta description, or is it pulling through on a page basis? Now, there is a way that you can make sure that your meta title is being pulled through, but research has been done to show that this is not always effective. And that's because Google can rewrite a page title for individual search queries. Whereas if you use only your title and only your description that you have chosen to write, then it might not be as effective on all of the search terms that it's ranking for. So it's worth bearing in mind that it's not always a bad thing if it pulls through information from your page. But that's also important for you to know when you're writing your page that might happen, and to make sure that you are being as succinct as possible. Look at the SERP as well and see what features might affect click-through rate. So even things from paid ads, whether or not different results have the FAQ section that can decrease the amount of information that's shown on the page. Once we've done that, we then move on to competitor keyword review. So look at your top competitors that you deem to be the top competitors in this. It might be the ones that are ranking positions 1 to 3 for this particular keyword, or your actual competitors that you want to focus on. So what terms are they ranking for on their similar page? You can do that by plugging into various tools. You can use that to also find synonyms that you might need to include on your page. So like travel insurance, for example, making sure that we're using things like holiday insurance, using the term cover as well, which not only increases the relevancy of your page, but then also just helps to give it a bit of variety, so you're not always saying the same thing. So we've looked at competitors, we've looked at what our page should be doing. The next bit is the juicy bit. We need to start by looking at the URL structure. Now, this we should only ever touch if it's completely wrong, really. It's not really, there's not a lot of value in changing a URL structure unless it's absolutely necessary. But it is really important that you know what the page is about from the URL, that it's not really spammy, that it does match with your focus keyword. It just needs to be clear, really. We next need to look at your H1s and make sure there's only one on the page. Now, this is of decreasing importance for SEO really, but from just a technical thing, that you should only ever have one title on the page. So let's just make sure that that we are ticking those boxes, that there is only one title, which is the H1 on the page. That should really be the biggest thing on the page. We also need to make sure that that fits in with your keyword targeting. So you know what you should be targeting from the previous two sections. Is it? Is it not? And we also need to make sure that that's customer first. And it doesn't sound like Yoda's written it. Because even though a keyword might be travel insurance cover for holiday, that isn't how people speak. So make sure that your titles are personable. Next, we need to look at the meta description. Typically, these are between 130 and 160 characters. In 60% of cases, Google will rewrite your meta description, even if you have done everything you can to make sure that it's perfect. So let's not be too disheartened. We still need to make sure that we're doing a good job in this, and it's as good as it can be, but we can't be disheartened when it is rewritten, because it is increasingly being rewritten, which does then increase the chances of click-through rate. So, not a bad thing. Make sure that in your meta description that you are using the target keyword. This will mean that in the SERP that keyword is then made bold, which then increases its visibility from someone that's scrolling through the page, which is a good thing. Make sure that it matches the SERP research that you've done, but understand that this page also ranks for probably, hopefully, hundreds of other things. So you won't be able to be relevant for absolutely everything, and honing in on just one of those search terms might not be a good thing. So make sure to explain what the whole page is about, really. Also consider how you can increase click-through rate. So using verbs at the start, understanding that if it's going to truncate it, it will truncate it at the end. So put the most important information at the front. Next thing to look at, a really simple one, is look at the index status of the page. Is it indexed? Does it need to be? You will probably have already found this out when you're looking at your page anyway. If it's not ranking for anything, likelihood is it's not indexed. But understand that if it is a duplicate page or very similar to something else, it might just be a good thing for it not to be indexed sometimes, or if it's a partnership page. So you need to understand, whether or not this page does need to go through a full SEO review, or if it's more important from a customer. Next, we need to look at all of the images on the page. Are the images on brand? Are they relevant to the topic as well? Because those two are two very different things. Do they have alt tags? This is more in the technical specifications. Are they compressed and the right size, but still high quality? It's really important to make sure that when you're uploading images, that you are uploading them in the highest resolution you can, or in the highest size that you can for the size of the box. So if you have a space that's only 500 pixels wide, only upload it in 500 pixels wide, but make sure that you compress that rather than uploading an image that is 1,000 pixels wide that is still compressed. Because an image that is 500 pixels wide and compressed is always going to be then smaller, which helps things like page speed. And page speed helps someone's user journey. If we forget ranking factors and everything, it's just better for a person if a page loads up as quickly as it can. Subheadings, now we're actually getting into the proper content. So subheadings are used by someone to scan down a page to see what sections are relevant. So we need to make sure that those headings are customer focused, that you can understand just by scanning that what that section is about, that they're benefit driven, and we know exactly what that section is going to be about. We also, from an SEO point of view, it's a good idea to make sure that you've got those keywords in there as well, so that if that's a question that's relevant to the search, or to someone's search, then they know that that's relevant, and obviously it helps with SEO as well. Page copy review. Now, this one's not particularly for SEO, but it's really important for your brand to make sure that you are using on-brand statements. So that if someone is reading this, they know that it's from you, that it's not from another brand down the corner or isn't just a Joe Blogs, that it is identifiably you that they're reading. We need to look at things like the length of sentences and, where possible, really question whether sentences need to be longer than 20 words. Now, sometimes, just sometimes, it's not possible to shorten that down. But where we can, we'll try to stick to that rule. We also need to make sure that we are answering all of the, well, not all of the pain points, but answering the most important pain points that you've found as part of your research process. Also, need to make sure that you are using benefits driven and customer driven language. So if it's quite heavy on the we's and their hours, then that is very business centric, because you're talking about what you can do rather than the benefit to the person. So let's just drop that step in someone's comprehension of something by saying you can do this with this. It's quite simple. And the last one, ask yourself, is the language simple? I'm not saying dumb this down to any degree, but the average reading age of someone in the UK is 9 years old. That's not to say that people are stupid. That's not to say that people can't read, but that's just that if you're scanning something, you don't fully take everything in when you're reading. So you need to really make sure that you are getting to the point quickly, that we're not waffling, that if we've asked a question in a heading, you answer it straight away. We don't give them War and Peace before we get to the answer. So you say, does this work? You don't then go into oh, well, people have asked this question for a many number of years. You say, yes, it does, and this is why. So we get to the point, we make sure that it's simple, that people can get the answers that they're looking for to make informed decisions. Links, very SEO topic, this one, links. Have a look at what links are on the page. And then consider what links should be on the page as a natural step for someone in their customer journey. So you might want to, for that, look at the research that you did on the previous page path and the next page path to understand where people naturally go next. Does that match with the links that are on the page? But to some certain degree, there might be links that you would add in this section, on the page, where it might not always be relevant, but might be added from SEO point of view to make sure that you're pushing links down to all of the pages, that they're not orphans. So sometimes there might be occasions where it might not feel like the most logical thing, but where from an architectural point of view and hierarchy, where it's needed. So there is sometimes a degree of compromise. Also need to look at internal anchors. Especially for a very long blog post, considering that people will be looking on mobile, using anchors is a very good way of breaking up a page, of making sure that people can skip ahead if they want to, and that they know what you're going to cover on the page as well. As part of looking at what the page looks like, always look to see what it looks like on a mobile. Make sure that it matches up with desktop, because sometimes some images won't pull through, or some whole sections we've found in the past as well don't pull through. So check whether the information is harder to digest on mobile. You often find that a short paragraph on a desktop will look like a massive paragraph on mobile. So we need to make sure that we're really kind of breaking that up and making it digestible on all mediums. And the very last thing that you need to look at is CTAs. So what is the next logical thing for this person to do? If this is an informational intent page, then your next page path probably won't be to convert. So you won't be wanting to push people to get a quote. You might want to push people to find out more about that topic, something that's relevant, so that they read more. You might even want to throw in a cheeky link to find out more about your products, but it won't be necessarily to buy. So have a think from a customer's point of view as to what is the next logical step for you to take. So what we really want to do here is to decrease bounce rate. Make sure that people can stay on site for as long as they can to find out more and to trust us more, so that when they are ready to buy, that they choose us. Now, the time is yours. I've created this short guide that goes through everything we've talked about today, which I'll put the link in below as well, rather than you having to copy this beautiful URL. It goes through section by section so that you can use that on every page that you are updating. You can put then a score next to it as to 1 being bad, 5 being really good, which can help you prioritize which things you want to focus on. You might not always be able to focus on everything to get it up to 5s down the board, so there might be some compromises along the way. But what you can then do after you've finished is, once you're ready to go live, you can then create a separate column to score it, to see where it now sits in an honest way, because putting 5s down the board might not be the most helpful for you, but it can then help you to see the progress of content as it goes along, to document your findings as you go down the list. So I hope you found this useful, and good luck in your SEO reviewing, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye.